So I have my hands on an exclusive version of the audio recording of the warning from the Chinese flotilla that conducted live fire exercises off the coast of Sydney last month.
We're conducting live fire exercise in the circle area. Center position, 37 degrees, 00 minutes.
Let's check it out.
Radius, 10 nautical miles. All vessels please keep all clear from 0930 hours to 1400 local time. Chinese naval warship stand by on channel 16. 安全通告，安全通告，安全通告。这里是中国海军编队，我正在进行火炮实弹射击训练。射击区域圆心南纬3拐度动分，东经15拐度动2分，半径10海里。计划时间从当地洞口沙洞至腰射洞洞，要求所有船只远离以上区域。中国海军军舰在交流频道保持收听。Security, security, security. This is Chinese Naval Task Force. We're conducting live fire exercise in the circle area. Center position, 37 degrees, 00 minutes south, 157 degrees, 20 minutes, 02 minutes east. Radius 10 nautical miles. All vessels please keep the all clear. From 0930 hours to 1400 local time. Chinese Navy warship stand by on channel 16.
That was a transmission relayed on the guard frequency picked up by a commercial airliner. I got this from a very reliable source. It's an unverified recording, but you can hear in it, this is coming over the guard frequency, which means it's normally tracked for emergencies. So anyone who activates a beacon or an EPIRB aircraft can generally track and monitor that channel and pick it up. So the Chinese have broadcast on this frequency when they're about to conduct their live fire exercises. Normally you put in a NOTAM in advance, which means your aircraft won't fly through that area. As it stands, the Chinese didn't do that. They gave the lat long for the center point of their exercise and then broadcast that they were going to be firing in that area. And they also verified the safe ranges. So this is interesting. The fact that I've got this, I've heard this once or twice on other channels, but I have not heard the full version. You can hear that the broadcast being done in English and what's either Cantonese or Mandarin as well. And in the background, you can hear some chatter on what sounds like a flight deck. You can hear a pilot discussing in English something about a NOTAM or something else.
We're conducting live fire exercise in the circle area. Center position, 37 degrees.
Hypothesizing that means the pilot was trying to figure out through air traffic control exactly what's happening. This could be a hoax, but it's very unlikely. I think for someone to be able to do that on that range in that part of the world is quite rare. Now, I've contacted the Minister for Defence, the Honourable Richard Marles, and asked for comment around this recording and verify. There's been no reply as of yet, but it's pretty interesting. Again, I got some context from the source about this, and I'll read it out to you because what he says is quite interesting. So, when we were airborne, most of the time we have an emergency or guard frequency tuned onto our second radio. This frequency is dedicated for emergency communication and signals for emergency beacons, which is ELTs or EPIRBs. This is the frequency that the Chinese flotilla transmitted on. They only gave their position and radius of firing initially as 10 nautical miles, when then they were contacted to ascertain the vertical extent, as this wasn't included in their transmission. Initially there was no response, but after about 5 minutes they responded saying firing up to 15 kilometers, which is nearly 50,000 feet, and well above airline operating altitudes. So that's a pretty big expansion of the envelope. The context goes on to add this. We did not alter course, as by the time they made transmissions, we were relatively close to them. The closest we were to them was about 60 nautical miles. Aircraft behind us, which were originally tracking much closer to the ships, had more time to maneuver away from them, so altered their track to do so, and they were Qantas and Emirates flights. Air traffic control was radioed to ask whether they knew of the live firing. The answer was, of course, no, so we passed on to them the details we received on the guard frequency. Air traffic control would then have passed on that information to relevant authorities and alerted other aircraft in the area. As far as they know, we didn't stop flights. However, subsequent flights were planned to avoid the ships by at least 100 nautical miles. So that's pretty interesting context. So the point about this is when you do live firing or with any weapons platform, you generally lay down what's called a trace. A trace is it's an overlay area which incorporates the range of the weapon, where you don't want any movement of people or personnel or vehicles in that area because it's not deemed safe. So if you miss your target, then the round travels unhindered. With naval gunfire, maybe it's 15 kilometers. It's a long way. With rifle fire, it's shorter. It's like 1 or 2 kilometers. So the fact that the ceiling they added to it, or the bubble, the radius surrounding that live firing was 50,000 feet is interesting because it means they're probably using some pretty heavy weapons. I'm not sure whether any surface-to-air missiles were used, but this is definitely a threat to aircraft in the area. In the implications of it, you can imagine the diplomatic issues you would get if an aircraft was taken down with a lot of Australian citizens on it. There would be no survivors, and that would be quite serious. So what does all this mean? What's interesting about this, again, is, and I talked about this in my last video, which I'll link at the end of this. What's interesting is not the context for what the Chinese were, what the fleet was actually comprised of. It's the message they were trying to send to us. It's a pretty big ocean out there. They're doing live firing exercises, 600 plus Ks off the coast of Sydney. To me, it's a very clear message. If you are involved in any conflict supporting the Allies, especially when it comes to the South China Sea or Taiwan, expect to get hurt. We'll have vessels down here that have cruise missiles, guided firing systems, all sorts of things that can hit targets on the east coast of Australia. And we all know that on the east coast of Australia, there are naval bases, there's Garden Island, there's a lot of shipping that happens, a lot of commercial aircraft. It would have a real impact to Australia, our freedom of action, our economy, everything. So the concerning part here is the Australian Defence Force didn't know about this, despite the Minister for Defence saying that there was a comprehensive surveillance program watching these ships. They actually didn't know about it. They had to be told by air traffic control, which was reported by commercial aircraft, that live firing had begun. That's humiliating. I reckon that fleet would probably be having a laugh because they know that they were able to do live fire in our waters. We didn't even pick it up, and we kind of picked it up by accident. It's tempting to want to blame the Australian Defence Force for this. I don't. This is probably 15 years of neglect from both sides of the aisle in Australia. In the year 2009, there was a strategic review, a white paper released, which pointed out a requirement to substantially expand Australia's submarine fleet, to double it, I think, from its current holdings to 12 diesel-powered vessels. This was written by Mike Pizzullo, who's a fairly well-known public servant. I believe he's in a think tank now, but accurately predicted that we could be coerced by a much larger power. Brackets, no prize for guessing who that might be. The government acted on it. Eventually, we had the contract to the French to deploy our diesel submarines. We've now switched to the AUKUS platform. We're now looking at getting the Virginia-class submarines, which is a huge capability upgrade. The problem with all this is it's all going to happen too late. 2036, I think it was, the arrival of some of these vessels, it's too late. CIA Director William Burns said with reasonable levels of confidence that President Xi Jinping has instructed the PLA effectively to be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027. That doesn't necessarily signal intent, but it is quite an escalation of language. There's going to be a huge capability gap for Australia. We don't have the means to protect our shipping lanes. We can't even watch a Chinese flotilla. So watch this space. I don't know what we're going to do about it. It's an interesting one, but this was a pretty key piece of information from an exclusive source. I really look forward to seeing what we do about this capability gap. It's a really big one. I don't think Australians fully grasp what this means. You ask any person that lived through World War II and lived in Sydney, and they remember what happened when the enemy came and visited our shores. So my grandmother used to tell me stories about the air raid sirens going off in Perth, Western Australia, when Broome was being bombed. This is all 80 years ago. So to think that we're safe down here in Australia, our geographical advantages don't matter anywhere near as much, or they don't help us anywhere near as much as they used to. So this is an interesting one. We've been sent a very clear message. Pay attention to this, and I'll keep an eye on it as well. And look forward to hearing more about this soon. Thanks a lot.